for our May 8th Waterworks and Lighting Commission meeting. And I would like to ask for approval for additions and corrections to the minutes for number one, our regular meeting of April 10th.
So move.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Objections? And also the same for the special commission meeting held on April 15th.
So move.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And then
Our favorite activity.
our favorite activity is the action item, which is review and accept the audit.
So you should all have a packet. I just think that was delivered to you. In that packet, there's a blue PowerPoint presentation that'll kind of start the discussion today. But I'll turn it over to Amber Danielski. Most of you know she's the signing director that's been on our audit for a number of years and been in charge for several years with Clifton Larson Allen. And with that, I'll turn it over to Amber.
Sounds good. Good evening, or good afternoon, everyone. The way the day goes, it could be evening kind of thing sometimes, right? In the packet here, it kind of summarizes everything in a lot of the bigger documents, but if you have questions in those bigger documents, we can go through those after I get through these slides. So turning to page 3 of the document, this is all kinds of required communications that we have to give you as auditors, and it's a lot of it's more in detail in the governance communication letter if you're looking for more information. But overall, the first thing is that we had an unmodified audit opinion, quote unquote, a clean audit opinion. Based on our testing, which we do on a sample basis, we don't look at every single billing you do, we don't look at every single disbursement or every single journal entry or payroll. Otherwise, we'd probably still be here doing the audit, and it might actually take us like 3 years to look at everything that was done, kind of thing. But based on all that results of our testing, we didn't find anything that was materially misstated, and then that would have made us have to do some other type of audit opinion. So this is what you strive for every year.
So can I ask a question? So as you approach that, how do you determine, what area to audit or how many samples per whatever?
That's kind of why we do our audit in 2 phases. We come in December and kind of ask Jeff questions, ask Shannon questions, ask the billing team questions, ask different questions to say, okay, what happened this year? What's gone on? What kind of turnover did you have? And in what positions? Okay. And from there, we also read minutes and try and get a feel for what's going on for the year. And from there, then we determine, okay, we should look at this and maybe pick 25 for a sample here, or we'll look here and we'll maybe look at 10. So like I'll use work orders for an example. Sometimes depending on how many projects you have during the year and the size and volume of those projects, we may test 10% of those, or we may test 25% of those. It kind of varies with the projects of what's going on. If there's a new accounting standard or a new auditing standard, we may look at things a little differently just because they're new. So like this year, we spent a lot more time asking IT questions because there was a new auditing standard that's focused on IT risks, cybersecurity risks, just how, since everything's more electronic workflow and all kinds of stuff like that, understanding how the automated part of that impacts the ultimate numbers that come in your audit. So it varies every year. Certain things we look at every year no matter what, just because they're a significant dollar amount. But otherwise it's kind of based on the current year activity and what we think the risk is in that area. So when we're developing those tests and designing what we're doing, we're following generally accepted auditing standards and governmental auditing standards. The governmental auditing standards just kind of add a little bit on to the normal standards. A lot of times it comes down to compliance with laws and regulations. So we may review, how do you make sure you're in compliance, make sure you're getting W-9s when you need to, or issuing 1099s for all the right people kind of thing. Or maybe it's something with Wisconsin retirement. How are you making sure everybody should be paying into Wisconsin retirement is, and from a sample basis on that part. So that's pretty much, in my mind, that's the big difference between regular auditing standards that just a private company might have to endure for their audit versus what happens when you're a government kind of thing. And a lot of times, if you're getting grants, that's where the government auditing standards kick into from there. For 2023, there were no new accounting policy changes. I know when I was here last year, we had a conversation about the subscription-based IT arrangements, and that was a new standard coming in. based on Jeff's assessment and based on our testing, there was technically only one that might have met the rules, but it was so small of a dollar amount that it didn't have to be recorded. Again, it was something you have to analyze every year because software packages that you're buying and rent or leasing or paying subscription payments for can change every year, but that's why we were able to say there was no policy changes here in 2023. There was just one past adjustment, which is the same past adjustment we've talked about in the past couple of years for unrealized losses on your investments. Under GASB accounting rules, your investments need to be recorded, are supposed to be recorded at fair value as of 12/31. But the PSC doesn't want you to do that because they don't want to see the ups and downs with the market all over the place. So every year we have to make this assessment of what kind of dollar amount difference is that, and is it small enough that it's okay to just go with this past adjustment on your financial statements and say, yeah, we know about it, but we don't think it's misleading to the readers of the financial statements that we didn't record this, because most of the time you're looking at it from a PSC basis anyway. Or if it ever got big enough, and we've had some electric utilities where it has been big enough, we just record it for financial statement purposes. And so that's just something we've gone over every year. And then we had one small adjustment that we proposed just to get some of the life insurance OPEB adjustments just be cleaned up. There was just a clerical difference on one work paper, and so we just wanted to get it adjusted. Nothing that was significant.
Jeff, what is LRLIF?
That's the life insurance that the state has. It was a small adjustment between the water and electric utilities on the inflows and the outflows. So net effective utility was zero. It was just between the two divisions.
Is it common then for utilities to book as we have booked without marking to market and then creating the adjustments year to year? Is it typical for all the utilities to do that, or do some?
We've had some that actually do record it,
They do.
and then we have some that go with this past adjustment schedule. It varies based on all the individual, different municipalities look at it differently, and different board members look at it differently, and it depends, and it depends on the dollar amount. If this was $1 million, we would have to record it on your financial statements, and that would be the end of it.
So essentially the offset would be to dividend income. So instead of having a consistent dividend every year, this would be fluctuating that from year to year based on what the market is for interest rates. So that's why we haven't booked it in the past, just so you've got that consistent level of income that you see, dividend income, and not the flow from year to year. Last year, this was about a $200,000 not recorded losses on investments. So in reality, we would have had $200,000 less in 2022. This being $100,000, we would have had an additional $100,000 in 2023. So it's just kind of how those are marked and that way. But
What would be the dollar amount, Jeff, that you would think it should go in the financial statement?
We heard $1 million over here.
It's
I mean, you're
I think
trying to
million's
keep this
a little lower
consistent,
than
but
that.
what would flag it for you that?
I mean, if it was over 300,000, I mean, our investments are, $12, $13 million. That it's still $100,000 is significant, but it's not that material that it's going to be, in my opinion, needed to be on the financial statements.
Okay.
Okay.
As part of our audit, we do look at your internal controls. That's also part of how we determine, do we need to pick a sample of 25 or 40 or whatever from there. But we don't give an opinion on your internal controls. We don't do enough detailed testing of that to get to that point. But based on our review of what you do have in place, we didn't find anything that was lacking or just wasn't there enough that would result in a finding. So that's why when you look at your internal control letter at the back of the bound document, you'll see that it says that we didn't find any material adjustments, but there could be some just because we don't go down to the level that would require us to give a true opinion on the internal controls. And from that compliance standpoint that I discussed, we didn't find any issues in what we had tested on that either. Moving then to page 4, this is just a simple comparison of the electric utility operating income.
Before you
Yep.
leave that, you mentioned the emphasis on cyber issues. Have you found some in other operations that could be educational for us to learn?
What we've seen so far is nothing that's been to the point where we have to give a finding for it, but it's more, making sure you get written policies in place. Make sure your backup plan is in writing. Make sure your disaster recovery plan is in writing. And then one of the things that we've seen a little bit more recently is, password requirements. When you have, whether it's 8 characters, 16 characters, or whatever like that, we've seen some that haven't necessarily been updated in the past couple years to reflect best practices. Because best practices is usually now what, 14 letters and characters and different things like that. And we've seen some that aren't that thing. So overall, our recommendation is just to make sure you start getting stuff in writing if you don't have it. That way, and then that way, if anything does happen, you have it. There's a guide there for somebody, and then just make sure everybody's keeping up on the best practices. Make sure you're subscribing to listserv emails that talk about cybersecurity best practices, or making sure you have, your passwords are updated, or making sure nobody has rights or access to things that they shouldn't have. That there's a concept of least privilege kind of thing. That's even something we follow at CLAs. You don't get access to everything. You get access to what you need to do your job kind of thing, and making sure that there's no inconsistencies there. And that's basically what we're just recommending to everybody. And then also just, I'm sure you guys have seen everything in the news lately where there's been different looks at what utilities have and what their things are, and just always keep up to date on that kind of stuff. Make sure your patches are up to date. It's kind of like even for your own personal cybersecurity things. Keep all that stuff up to date because it changes faster than we can keep up with sometimes.
Do you hear that, Nat?
Already on top.
We know.
Excuse me. With page 4, this is just a comparison of the electric utilities operating income, operating expenses for the past 2 years. So in 2023, there was just over $29.8 million in revenue, which was an increase from about compared to $28.8 million in 2022. Every line increases. It always varies based on usage and even your power cost adjustment. All that plays into it. So nothing stood out overly significant, but it was an increase from the prior year. For operating expenditures, those did go up as well. That was $27.3 million compared to $26.8. And I will say the majority of the increase, or I guess the way I look at it, is going to be in your administration and general line. And what caused that is primarily the Wisconsin retirement pension amounts. The ones those get recorded only at year-end adjustments because the PSC, again, doesn't want to see some of those fluctuations. But when the updated numbers came out from the state in October of 23, which are basically the 22 numbers, there's always this time lag for it. Wisconsin fell from being 106% funded to being 96% funded. So it's still, you're less than 100% funded, but Wisconsin's still one of the top ones in the nation for being funded. So I fully kind of expect it to fluctuate back. What happens is the actuary, when the state's hiring their actuary to do this, they'll obviously look at all the different trends, but interest rates are included in part of their calculations. So as interest rates go up, that changes some of the way they calculate their numbers. So I believe that was a good chunk of why that led to that shift, but every municipality saw that shift. So instead of being a net pension asset because it was overfunded, now you have a net pension liability on your statements for your share of that pension benefit. And that's where, on the financial statements, because that's under admin in general, that's where the pension benefit expense line is shown. That's why that line is up so much. And so overall, you still end up with a positive operating income of $2.5 million. For the water utility then, the utility also saw operating revenues increase from $5.5 million to $5.9. Operating expenditures went down. I do not recall what was going on in 22, but obviously you'll see the source of supply line was the line that saw the biggest decrease.
It's the pipeline.
And that, all those projects, that helps fluctuate it. And then you'll see that admin and general line, again, back up because of that whole Wisconsin retirement stuff. So the water utility ended up with operating income of just under $1.9 million for 2023. Page 6 then is just a comparison of your rate of return for the past 5 years. Just seeing that it's, obviously 22, it was a dip for various reasons, and obviously that varies with projects as well, kind of thing. But, pretty consistent where you've been increasing, I guess I would say, from the 2019 portion now to be in 2023, where basically both utilities are in that 5% range.
And what's the max on that, Jeff? 6 or 7?
You know, that also varies with interest rates. I know right now, I think they're looking at about 6.25% to 6.5% is what they're giving new rate cases at, depending on, again, individual circumstances.
Any questions on those financial numbers? If not, then the last thing I wanted to specifically touch base on is, again, another new accounting standard, another new accounting rule. So for the 2024 financial statements, Gatsby wanted to try and clarify some of the stuff with your vacation and sick leave, compensated absences, and just make sure, basically they want to make sure everybody's being a little bit more consistent on what they're recording. Because some municipalities only pick up like sick leave if you're going to get paid out when you retire, not necessarily what you use the next year or what you might use in the next year. Or same with vacation. They might only pick up vacation only if you can carry it over for more than a year, kind of thing. So what the standard wants everybody to do is kind of just look at all your leave policies and determine what really needs to be recorded if you haven't been recorded. I don't anticipate a huge change in your financial statements personally, but you know, there might be other leaves out there I'm not considering that are in your policy kind of thing. So I just wanted to point this out to you. It'll be effective for the 24 financial statements. And so it could, depending on what everybody finds when they're looking through all the different policies and union agreement, you know, all those different things about what's out there, there could be just a little bit more of an uptick in what gets recorded for your compensated absences liabilities.
Jeff, is this different with Wisconsin Public Service? Is this going to be affected there at all?
This, I don't think they've looked at it yet. I'm guessing it's gonna be another one of these things that they don't wanna see, but this, we'll dig into a little more. I mean, we do book our vacation as a liability. Most of it gets used up during the year, so it's gonna be the sick leave, and we'll just have to kind of go through the tests that are listed here to determine if that's gonna have to be booked as a liability or not.
Do we allow leave accumulation?
Sick leave? Sick leave does accumulate.
But it
for
doesn't have
employees.
a cash value.
But it, yeah, when you leave,
Say
it
that.
has
There's no cash value to it.
Okay, only for sick
Times.
use.
And even at retirement, it's not.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And with that, does anybody have any other questions they'd like me to answer?
Item 10 on your letter, fact that the amount of uncollateralized deposits or uninsured, unregistered securities held by the counterparty. You want to talk about that?
What page are you on, John?
What's item 10 in the CLA letter?
Oh, okay.
Basically, and then, so I guess if you then in the bound document, if you want to go to page 19.
There could be 2-page proofs, but it's, this is the cover letter.
I think I highlighted it there too.
Yeah, so what that means is as of 12/31, we look at it, like a lot of the footnotes are as a point in time. So as of December 31st, 2023, when you look at the bank balances, there was more in the bank than the FDIC coverage for that bank. So, you know, because obviously there's FDIC coverage for time and savings accounts and then demand accounts. And so due to, and I don't remember which accounts it was or anything like that, but basically the amount in the bank balance was more than the FDIC coverage that you had allotted for those accounts. And it's just something we have to point out here because sometimes municipalities have like millions of dollars over that threshold. And it comes down to what you want to do to manage your risk with that. And again, the reason I also say that it's a point in time is because it could have also dropped back down because on January 5th because a check cleared kind of thing. So it's more of a point in time. And so what we pointed out for is because obviously if it's someplace that doesn't have something like that and they're having like $2 million uninsured, that's a risk that if something happened with the bank, you might not get your balances back, kind of thing. So it's something we point out in the letter and in the financial statements, just to say, hey, this is out there. But then it's up to management and governance to determine, is that an acceptable level to me? Is it just high because it's December? Or is it always about 300,000? Are we okay with that? If we're not okay with that, well then you either gotta split out your money to more banks or work to see if you can get some collateral that then the sentence would change slightly here to say, yeah, it's still above FDIC coverage, but you have collateral to back it, kind of, that's been pledged to back it in case something would happen. Or, and I've seen varying degrees of what they wanted, what people do. Because obviously there's a fee sometimes with the collateral too, so does that really offset whatever interest income you might be getting or anything else that you might want to consider on whether or not that risk of having some over the FDIC limit is that enough, is that too much for you, or is it, you're okay with it? And those are just the things you have to consider.
Was that just one account or multiple?
That is primarily one account, that's our operating account.
Okay.
And we do look at the FDIC website. They publish financial statistics and ratios on all the banks that they oversee.
Sure.
Which kind of helps with our comfort level of having funds in excess of that.
But
FDIC
generally,
insurance.
it's
We're
just
pretty
temporary,
consistently
right?
over that, yeah.
We are, correct. But, I mean, even this year, I had a conversation with the bank, and, you know, we looked at their ratios, and they're still very strong, so we're comfortable with that amount being over.
They don't have a bunch of bonds that they have reserved.
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions from commissioners on either the overall report or the letter from CLA?
Would you entertain a motion to approve?
I would.
I shall make a motion to approve the audit results.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Audit is approved as presented.
Thank you.
Thank you, have a good rest of the afternoon.
Well, you can stay for the rest of the meeting.
Don't wish that.
I get to get back and get to another meeting.
Safety report. Any questions or comments on the safety report?
Sean, now you were out there to review the water utility when they replaced the hydrant, correct? What's your opinion of how the work was done?
Really good. I mean, we do monthly training, and these guys know how to do their jobs, but it's always good to get a second set of eyes on the work zones that they're setting up and the work that they're doing. But yeah, they did an outstanding job that day.
Good, I mean, it serves as a good refresher, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay,
It's
so
good to
I'm
go,
glad-
to make sure the rubber meets the road, if you will.
Glad you were there.
So,
Well, thanks, Adam, for doing a good job.
Any other questions from a safety standpoint? If not, the line superintendent's report.
Josh, what's a bail?
It clamps the wire to the mast. I don't know how to explain it without showing you one.
Okay,
It just holds, it's just a connection that attaches the wire to the mast.
okay. Being that it pulled out of a house, I figured it was
They
something
break
like that.
sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, just as an aside, they caught that guy where was that, down in, the guy that ran through the barricade and
Oh.
dragged that pole and,
In the West End.
where was that, Kenosha or?
Kokon.
Kakana.
They caught him that day, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Alliant, so you got an Alliant call that was outside your district, yeah.
Slays me that people can't figure out who they're paying their electric bill to.
Must be nice to have that amount of money, right?
Yeah, that's how.
Just send a check. If there are any more questions for Josh, we'll move on to the water department.
Any results from that washout inspection?
Yeah, they said everything looked normal, and they'll
Okay.
be submitting the report to the DNR.
Okay.
West Tower looked all right.
Yes. Yep.
What kind of stuff do you find in there?
Sometimes you'll notice if there's a ladder that's mounted in there, sometimes that's corroded and that'll have to be repaired. They'll look for any type of corrosion that'll kind of determine the paint schedule as well.
No issue with algae or anything like that?
No, we have mixers inside all the tanks to help with that as well.
Any other questions for Adam? Not customer service support?
Well, having the moratorium off really helps, huh?
Yeah, nice improvement in collections. Good to see that. I'm glad to see this evaluation that you're going to give us of the success of the customer payment arrangements.
We're keeping a better tab on that this year.
Excellent.
Well, and just as another note regarding the Alliant Energy call, we actually addressed this with our call center, because that's who called Alliant in, so they'll ask additional questions and hopefully they can determine whether or not they're our customer or not.
Oh.
Any other questions for Lynn? Todd, let's move on to the Director of Finance report. So you actually had a $3.9 million collections.
It's a good month.
Yeah. Any questions for Jeff?
At MEUW Accounting and Customer Service Roundtable, how is that agenda determined just to start discussion and how you prepare for that meeting?
Prior to the meeting, the committee, we meet virtually. There's about 6 or 7 of us in the state that represent the utilities, and we kind of come up with the main categories. And then for this one, after Lynn and I talking, we added disconnects, which is
Okay,
probably one of
good.
the better conversations that we had of
Okay.
the whole day. So it was good to have that discussion with everybody.
Sure.
So we come up with just hot topics that people are dealing with, and if people have issues, we talk about them then too.
It seemed very well worth doing the roundtable.
Yeah.
Thank you for facilitating it this year.
Yeah, it was a good time.
By the $561,000 some odd dollar transfer from investments this month.
That was our April pilot payment. So every month, we just, do the monthly deposit into the tax account, and then the 3 times a year, we just pull out for that.
You had to transfer that from investments.
Correct, it comes from our money at Prevail Bank, which is, pretty liquid. So we're not taking it from Ellers or any of the CDs that are there.
questions for Jeff? I have one more, I guess. The other water revenues category?
That is the money we get from the city for the joint meter allocations. So for doing the billing for the sewer, that's that number. And that's the number that kind of grows to close to over $300,000, but then we, at the end of the year, we reconcile that amount, but that's the amount that we record as revenue. The rest of it kind of goes at the end of the year and decreases expenditures. And that's a PSC rule on how that gets accounted for. Yeah.
I was going to ask another question, but you cut it off. The residential water sales, is that all pretty much price, or is there a volume factor there as well?
I think we said residential usage was up about 1.2% for the first 3 months of the year, but mainly it's price driven.
The investments, interest rates are all looking better.
Yeah, looking pretty good. A couple that are still hanging out from 2021. A couple of them roll off this year.
If there are no other questions for Jeff? Matt, information systems?
So we have no more dial-up connections? Was
Not
that
to
the end
those-
of it?
Not to those meters.
Okay.
West substation meters still are dial-up, but they're older style meters and the modems are more stable.
Are there any plans to change those connections?
I'm not sure, haven't discussed.
There haven't
it.
been any issues with those meters.
Right.
Now, the iPads are for the crew, correct? How many iPads are
We have
upgraded?
5.
Oh, just 5? Okay.
Yeah, both, the electric foreman each have an iPad, water department has one, both the trouble trucks have one, water and the electric truck.
Okay.
So.
I was thinking there were more than 5.
Nope.
Okay.
No more questions for Matt? Key accounts, conservation manager report?
It was interesting seeing on that Rapids Ford, you know, I go by there and I don't see any vehicles parked there, but apparently somebody is. The charging stations?
Yes. I guess those are level 3 chargers, and they're gonna be, you know, the largest scale, quickest charging
Yeah.
stations there are, take typically about 45 minutes. I don't think right now at this point, there's a lot of EV vehicles in this area. However, they are charging a few, obviously, because they went over that
Yeah.
50 kW, so now there's gonna be a demand charge. The demand charges are very significant on those level 3s. The one vehicle taking 45 minutes would typically, is gonna run about a $750 demand charge on one vehicle. So that's a lot, that's huge. So I had conversations with the owner about it. He wasn't expecting this. So I guess the best recommendation we could give him is to switch to a time of day rate and really monitor when those are being charged. However, that may be difficult to do with the Ford contract he has and what he has to do to be in compliance to be a dealership. So very early stages, and time will tell where that goes as far as rates.
Any electric the three-phase charger, which Sean mentioned, that hooks up to any electric meter in the state is going to draw a demand charge. So this is one thing, again, with the electric vehicle rollout, they haven't quite kind of cart before the horse type thing. I guess Ford wanted him or forced him to put those in. I think.
Yes, he had to.
Any indication of whether the charging, because I imagine they're selling some EVs, or if they're charging, their own supply of EVs?
They
or
are.
other customers coming in?
They are, but they can use the level 2s, which take 4 or 5 hours and don't run that large demand out.
Okay, I see.
Unlike people that maybe are traveling through,
Yeah,
need to get back on the road, they're gonna use a level 3. It's gonna take 45 minutes and they need it quick.
yeah.
So that's where the cost is.
Huh.
The level 2s wouldn't reach that high demand. It's specifically the level 3s,
Okay,
the quick chargers.
interesting.
Yeah.
As far as I know, that Thiel plant is defunct. I mean, there's basically it was a coated paper requirement. And I think the last mill that was using any of that was probably Beeren. And they've converted entirely to packaging. So they were actually dispersing talc.
When I spoke with the plant manager, he said there was a slight possibility they would stay open. And that was back in November. But I had no contact with them. I tried to get a hold of somebody. And so at this point, we just moved down to just a regular general service customer because they're using about as much as a large home uses at this point.
A nice write-up on that project. The pilot, those 10 places, that's good data.
That is good. Thank you for sharing that, Sean.
You're welcome.
Is there any discussion of possibly continuing this program? I mean, this is a pilot, but has been any discussion yet?
It'll be interesting to see if somehow this maybe is incorporated broadstream into the actual Focus Energy program to some extent. I wonder the same thing, but I guess time will tell.
Yeah. But you see it getting pulled in the Focus on Energy possibly?
Yes.
Okay.
So time will tell on it. I don't know if it's gonna go another year, but I think we had our opportunity and other municipalities will probably follow.
But this
Have
was a
theirs
positive,
and- yeah.
this was a positive pilot.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Any discussions with the library where they sit with making a decision on their solar installation?
We haven't had any communications with them, no.
Okay.
I have not. I've read a few things,
Yeah.
but that's about it.
Caveat emptor, right?
We're told.
Yeah, right.
No more questions for Sean. Can we move to the electrical engineer's report? Only one very minor item in terms of hotspots. Nothing that's of concern or imminent.
What's your question? Sorry.
You talked about hotspots. I said thermal imaging. There's nothing else.
Oh, nothing else that we found that was emergent that needed to be fixed right away.
What's a PMH?
That's a background switch gear, so it's able to make and break connections to switch.
Underground switch gear.
Okay.
No more questions for Tyler? Move the Director of Engineering report. So under your frequency schedule program, what goes dark?
So I try to pick more industrial load than commercial load, but I absolutely stay away from schools, police departments, city municipalities, hospitals, clinics, anything that might be considered a critical item in the city.
And do those businesses know they're on this list?
They do not know they're on this list.
Should they know they're on this list?
I don't know, it's been in place for almost 15 to 20 years now, and we've never had a problem, and if this problem occurs, the entire United States will see it, so I don't know that I would worry them over it, because I
It'll
think.
be cascading before it gets here.
Yeah, it's,
We're not a huge load center. I mean, it'll start walking our way
right.
or somewhere else.
So I think you would just bring about more confusion and concern that probably isn't needed.
I like transparency. If I'm sitting on the other side of it
Yeah,
and my lights go out,
yeah,
I'd like to know
why?
why.
Right, but I think by that point, you're gonna see in world news that the United States is suffering a severe power problem with lack of generation, and they're gonna be reporting that all these blackouts are occurring throughout the country, so.
And what would the time lag be when the first domino falls? What would the time lag be estimated for here?
Depends how big the domino was.
Yeah, that's a really kind of general question, because, so, you know, the reason this is one of many things that are put in place, and the reason was because of the 2005 East Coast power outage. And so it's basically load is larger than generation on the entire grid. And by having this in place, you're gonna see parts of the grid shut down automatically, so you don't get to a point where the entire grid collapses. And so as far as soon as, it could be as quick as a half a second, or it could be as long as hours, depending on what is causing the problem. Did a transmission line go out of service? Did a large generation unit fall offline? You know, something like that. So,
Unplanned.
yeah.
Yeah.
So how long is relevant to the problem? You know, what was the problem that started it, kind of thing?
A lot of municipalities aren't really involved in this UFS program. The only reason we are is because we have high-tech relays and most municipals don't. So we have the capability to do it, and most munis don't.
Yeah.
So that's how we got drug in.
And that's how we got drug in. It's kind of a saying, never do a bad
Yeah.
job well.
Do a good job and this is the penalty.
Yeah.
Correct.
No more questions for Todd? Well, I guess just to follow up on that, I think if this begins to happen, my recommendation is that we reach a point where we are transparent with whoever's on
Yeah,
this list.
and I think what I could do is work with Sean, and then Sean could draft some type of letter and kind of reach out to some of the businesses that would be affected.
Okay. So, general manager's report. Any questions for Jim? So we'll hear more from ACE's
Yeah.
activity pretty soon, right?
Correct. We have to meet, we had met as a full board, we got their presentation, and then several of us, the bigger munis, met yesterday at a long conference call in the afternoon, to provide ACES some feedback, and then the full board meets, I think, on the 20th to kind of review what ACES has presented. As we suspected, it leaned heavily towards renewables, batteries, wind, and solar. We'd like to, the other thing that bothered us was which makes sense now, but they proposed having a large percentage of our energy buys basically on the market, up to 30 or 40% at some times. on the day-ahead market because the energy prices have been so low. They haven't really spiked artificially high. They can't for some unforeseen circumstance. So I think the gist of it after yesterday's call is we're going to steer more towards natural gas for capacity because the renewables, even if it's a battery now, because it only can run 2 to 4 hours, does not get full credit for capacity. I think renewables now are, solar is about 20%, but in 10 years it's going to be less than 10. Each year that number's going to go down, so we got some things to massage in it, but I think it'll work out.
Any other questions for Jim?
Yeah, could you clarify the PSC with that parallel generation rates?
That is basically the buyback rate
Okay.
for solar customers. Right now, most of the rates are based upon either the retail rate they're buying it at or the retail rate minus a few components or the cost of the power. We actually went and got ours changed early on, so we're not as heavily impacted as a lot of other munis are.
Okay.
But, so the first one in the hole is Sturgeon Bay, and they still haven't been ruled on by the PSC. They had their first hearing yesterday, I think, Jeff even sat in on it. But so once Sturgeon Bay gets over the hump, then the rest of us are gonna follow right behind it to more accurately reflect the cost of power on MISO and not retail rates. So that will not drastically, but it's gonna reduce the cost of what solar customers get on buyback rate, which makes sense because it costs us more to serve them. And most of those costs are spread to the rest of the customers.
Right.
So we're working towards that with the PSC to get that adjusted down.
Okay, thank you.
So, review of the accounts payable. A question on this blow-off.
What page?
It's the first page, 105. About top third of the page. 86,991. Is that whole year?
That's totaled with everything.
Pardon?
That's the health, dental, labor, and we're all total there, Jeff.
Yeah, so the blow-off was the
24,688.
2,400. The insurance was the majority of that for the February insurance. Then we reimbursed the city for health insurance.
Okay.
Yeah, what was it before, 18?
No,
No.
I mean, that's what our down was, it's just Adam getting drug into that payment made his blow-off charges look higher.
Oh.
On page 2, the SIRA focus on energy payment March sales, 11,000.
That's just the reimbursement, so that portion that you pay on your bill, that's just every month we pay half of it to Focus on Energy and half of it to Focus. So that's just a reimbursement that's coming off the customer accounts that they're funding.
The Sunshine Fund.
Sunshine Fund is a fund that employees contribute to on every paycheck, and it's just if you have surgery or anything. So it's just employee contributions. There's no utility dollars used in any of that. So if there's surgery or death in the family, instead of passing a hat around and getting contributions, we just use this fund.
And that's not over the 250,000.
No.
The ATC capital call, was that for a specific project?
So they do quarterly capital calls, and they do have projects, I think, every year that, a portion of it's capital call, a portion of it's debt. But this was just the quarterly one that we had this year. I don't know if it's tied to.
You don't know what it might be tied to?
I don't know what it's tied to.
No, they've got 4 or 5 large projects going on, and it's gonna go higher each month from the estimates they're giving us. So typically we get more than that back in earnings, but if we want to keep the same amount of ownership in ATC, we're gonna have to more cash in the next year, probably.
Okay. We're comfortable with that?
Yes.
This point, Mary, yes.
So that's an investment going.
It's a very good
Guaranteed
investment.
rate of return.
Not too many like that, right?
No.
Can I put some money in there? Okay. Any questions, additional questions on accounts payable? Not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second? I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
We stand adjourned.